Good evening. I am Ella Lacey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the branch meeting, the first of 2022. Um, I am president of the Carbondale branch of the AAUW, and we promise you will have an exciting and informative evening that will be filled with good action information. I want to welcome you to the AAUW start of the new year with our first branch meeting tonight. And do we ever have a call to action? Or perhaps I should say we have several calls to action tonight. Our member, Olga Widener, will present our speaker for the evening. Olga.
Thank you, President Lacey. It is my pleasure and an honor to welcome tonight Paula J. Purdue, the current co-chair of public policy for AAUW Illinois, with Tracy Sherman Falcon. Paula started out as a home ec teacher and started as the very first woman lobbyist for the Illinois Education Association in 1976. She retired from IEA in 2004 and started her own lobby firm. She retired in 2012 and is still a feminist and hopes to be equal before she dies. She's passionate about the priorities of AAUW, and we are all so thrilled to have her, and we give her a very warm welcome. Welcome, Paula Purdue. We're eager to hear you.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Ella. I am delighted to be here. I'm going to change the conversation a little bit. We're going to talk about public policy priorities, but I'm going to start with my perspective of ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment and some of the interesting issues that I got involved in the process of trying to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm going to speed through that so we have time to talk about public policy in 2022. But I think you'll find it very interesting how our political lives have changed so much when I start talking about the way the Equal Rights Amendment was received by Republicans and Democrats in the mid-70s and 80s and on. So I'm going to title this Friends in Strange Places, because I think that's kind of what I found out. And this, I never anticipated giving this presentation because, well, you'll find out. So in 1970, the state of Illinois included the Equal Rights Amendment in our Constitution. And in 1972, Congress passed the ERA and sends it to the states. And this is really hard for me to understand now, but within 1 month, 15 states had ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. We tried to pass it in 1972, it failed. In 1974, we had 3 women sponsors, Republicans and Democrats, and it failed, but I didn't realize until like 12 years ago. One of the gentlemen who was chief of staff for Governor Jim Thompson told me that the reason Senator Saperstein was not able to pass the Equal Rights Amendment in 74 is because her son worked in Chicago, and the old Mayor Daley, or the original Mayor Daley, knew that her son worked for the city. And so Mayor Daley told Esther Saperstein that if she ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, he would lose his job. So that's just a little bit about, you're going to learn more about how politics works. So I got hired in 76. What is amazing to me at that time and even now is that about half of the Republicans supported the Equal Rights Amendment and half of them did not. Half of the Democrats supported the Equal Rights Amendment and half of the Dems did not. In fact, the Democrat chairman, male chairman of the Labor Committee in the House, every time we called the Equal Rights Amendment, he would pound his fist on the desk and say that women should only be pregnant and barefoot, and they didn't need to have the Equal Rights Amendment. So I don't know how many of you remember the National Women's Political Organization, but that was a group of Republican and Democratic women, both parties, who supported equal rights, choice, and children's issues. And I mean, we can't even imagine that happening today. In 1977, Indiana became the 35th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, but we needed 38 more states. During the 80s, late 70s and 80s, another woman, Farley Peters, and I took out a House Democrat who was going to vote against the Equal Rights Amendment. We had dinner with him to try to encourage him to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. And he told us that he would vote yes if we would both go to bed and have sex with him. Well, we both wanted to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment very much. We excused ourselves, we went to the bathroom, and we actually considered his proposal. But then we decided we couldn't trust him. So we did not accept his proposal. And of course, he continued to vote no. In 1980, the National Republican Platform started their opposition to the Equal Rights Amendment. And President Reagan was opposed. And of course, that was due to Phyllis Schlafly. And you can't really talk about the Equal Rights Amendment without talking about Phyllis. She had an army of women who would bake bread, pies, and cookies and bring them to the legislature and convince the legislators to vote no on the Equal Rights Amendment because they were all good homemakers. We had fundraisers at Phyllis Schlafly's neighbor's house in Alton, Illinois, and her neighbor indicated that it was a neighbor that baked cookies for Phyllis's kids because Phyllis never baked cookies. I don't know that Phyllis even knew how to bake. Phyllis was one hell of a hypocrite. But anyway, that was fun to find out. In 1981, George Ryan became Speaker of the House. And at that time, he changed the vote from a simple majority, which it had been, to a 3/5 vote. And a 3/5 vote is just hard to get. So in 1982, and any of you who are younger and you want to find out more about this, just email me. But in 1982, there were a group of women supporters of the Equal Rights Amendment who threw pig's blood on a Senate door. We lost votes over that. I understand their passion. I understand their frustration, but it was not a wise thing to do. And additionally to that, we had nuns, Catholic nuns, sisters, sitting in the rotunda, the lobby of the Capitol, and went on a hunger strike. And I can't tell you how awful it was to come into the Capitol every day and see the sisters sitting more, looking weaker. Eventually several had to be hospitalized. We actually got a vote or two from the hunger strike, but what an awful thing to have to deal with. In 1983, Congress decided they would try to extend the deadline, and that failed by 6 votes. I don't have a recollection of any votes between 1983 and 2003. We had a vote in 2003. The Illinois House passed it 76 to 41, and you need 71 votes to get to a 3/5. But it didn't pass the Senate. And it was just a couple of years after, it was a year after Pate Phillip retired. And Pate Phillip had been the Republican president of the Senate and definitely an opponent to the Equal Rights Amendment forever. But in 2008, and I know this isn't a date that nobody knows about, but I think it's a very important date for the Equal Rights Amendment. Heather Staines was elected senator. Heather Staines is a wife of a family whose father is extraordinarily wealthy. I don't know how he got his money, but Heather Staines has a lot of money and has clout and power because of it. And she ran for election and she won. In 2014, Heather decided that, you know, we had legislators put in the Equal Rights Amendment Constitution every year, but nobody considered it seriously. Nothing ever happened. And Senator Staines decided that her purpose was going to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, and she sure did. But we had a vote in 2014. It passed the Senate by 70. It passed the Senate, and it was like the next to the last day of session, and we were just on the money. I mean, we just had 71 votes in the House that we knew of. Well, come to find out, on that next to the last day, one of our yes Democrats ended up going to prison for bribery. A second Democrat ended up just not coming to session. And the third woman Democrat, no one blames her for anything. She had a horrible life experience. Her stepson was killed in her front yard the night before we had the vote. And of course, she didn't come. So we just were not able to pass it in 2014. In 2016, the former president won. And in 2017, we had the Women's March. I think the Women's March was extraordinarily important. And maybe I have a hard time calling the former president's name, but maybe the former president helped us get our act together and get moving as well. So one of my friends, Sally Pancrazio, and her friend Kay are from McLean County. Sally is the former Dean of Education for Illinois State University. And I met her in the 70s when she worked for the Illinois State Board of Education. Wonderful woman, loved the pieces out of her. Well, she and Kay got ticked and decided that they were going to take over the McLean County Democratic Party. And the McLean County Democratic Party was controlled by 5 white men who were all union guys. And they had their way of doing business, but it wasn't the way that Sally and Kay thought a Democratic Party ought to be. And they worked very hard, and they have certainly taken over and improved the Democratic Party in McLean County tremendously. Now, McLean County is all Republicans. There's not a Democrat. There has not been a Democrat elected in McLean County since we had multi-member districts. So it's a very, very Republican area. And what Sally and Kay did is they talked and met with the former Republican senator's wife, Mrs. Maitland. Senator Maitland was a Republican senator when Pate Phillip was president of the Senate, and he was the chair of the Education Committee. So, I mean, I worked the Education Committee all the time because I was with the IEA, so I knew Senator Maitland, I thought, fairly well. And I just thought he was an upstanding, good man. Well, come to find out, he had multiple affairs with multiple women, and he accidentally had a bad stroke when he was with one of those women. And because he was not where he should have been, it took him longer to get to the emergency room, and he is very crippled. He cannot speak. He is in a wheelchair. His wife has stuck with him. God bless her. And Senator Maitland would never would have voted for the Equal Rights Amendment, not ever, ever. But Sally went to Senator Maitland's wife, Mrs. Maitland. Mrs. Maitland has 7 granddaughters, and Mrs. Maitland decided that the Equal Rights Amendment was the right thing for her and her granddaughters. And so she was the chairperson of the McLean County Equal Rights Committee. When you have a former senator's wife who was opposed to equal rights, the chair of the equal rights, it certainly raised a lot of eyebrows. And with her as the chair, Sally and Kate spent a lot of time talking to the Republican legislator in Bloomington and the senator in Bloomington and another senator from Champaign-Bloomington area, kind of sharing the area. So out of those 3 Republicans, they got 2 Republicans to say yes on the Equal Rights Amendment. The 3rd Republican, who was Senator Brady, and he ran for governor or something, either United States Senate or governor years ago. So you have heard of him. My opinion of him is he's a doofus. But anyway, he would never vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. And we knew he would never vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. But Sally and I met with his staff and talked to them about the importance of not taking a caucus position. A caucus position means that either the Democrats or the Republicans, because either caucus can do this, they have to vote the same way. So whatever the leadership tells them how to vote, they have to vote that way. If there is no caucus position, then the legislators can vote the way they choose. And we knew that and Senator Brady was the minority leader in the Senate, and we knew if he had a caucus position, it would be opposed to us. So we were able to get Senator Brady not to take a caucus position, and Sally got Dan Brady, who was a downstate Republican in leadership, to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment, and Senator Barrickman, a Republican in the Senate, to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. So, yoo-hoo. So then we all worked the Senate. This is in 2017. And we're doing everything we can to try to get the votes. Senator Staines discovered in November during veto override that the Republican senators would vote for the Equal Rights Amendment if it was scheduled after the March primary. And so they didn't call the Equal Rights Amendment until after the March primary. After the March primary, within a week, they called the Equal Rights Amendment. It passed the Senate with 43 votes, and it only needs 36. So they had plenty of votes. And every Republican woman voted for it except one. And the one Republican woman that did not vote for the Equal Rights Amendment, I had talked to her probably 6 months before and told her that we were really wanting her support for the Equal Rights Amendment. And she had the audacity to tell me that she had never been treated unequal. Well, I'd like to know what that feels like. But anyway, she happens, I don't know if it's her husband or her father, have a huge distribution center for food around Western University. I'm not sure what county it's in. But that woman and that family has more money than maybe all the other families in that county have. And maybe if you're the richest woman in the county, maybe you don't ever feel like you're not equal. And that's the only thing I can guess. So, but anyway, passed the Senate. And so now we work on the House. We had two Black women legislators, Representative Mayfield and Representative Flowers, who refused to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment because they said it had only been for white women and that white women only cared about them and not Black women. Unfortunately, there's some truth to their concerns. In the past, we white women haven't been as open to Black women's support as we should have been. We tried changing their minds. That just did not happen. We had the woman who was the Senate sponsor of the bill in Nevada, because Nevada passed the Equal Rights Amendment, I think in 2017. And so we had her come to talk to the House committee to pass the ERA. And the chief sponsor in the Senate was one heck of a candidate. She was a Black woman, had served in the Army, was a minister, was gay, and I think there was something else. Maybe she had a PhD. Anyway, she was an amazing woman. And she couldn't convince Mary Flowers that voting for the Equal Rights Amendment was a good thing. After the March primary, working in the House, one week we'd have 65 votes. The next week we'd have 67. And the next week we'd have 62. I mean, everybody was all over everywhere, and a lot of folks were not telling us what they were going to do. I had multiple meetings with Leader Durbin, who is the House Republican leader. Really don't have any. I had meetings with his chief staff, and asked that Durbin not make a caucus position. And I was told that the House Republicans were going to be able to vote the way they chose, and there would not be a caucus position. But I could never get how Minority Leader Durbin was going to vote. I couldn't get an answer. We had Planned Parenthood lobbyists talking to folks about voting for the Equal Rights Amendment. We had labor folks. AFL-CIO did a wonderful job getting us a vote from Decatur, a woman that, pardon me, a woman that AFL-CIO had supported wholeheartedly, and she was going to vote no, and AFL-CIO got her to vote yes. So we had lots of support in the labor communities. We had in the education community. I mean, we had everybody talking about the Equal Rights Amendment to anybody who would listen, and even to those who didn't want to. I spent a lot of time in and out of Representative Lou Lang's office, who was a chief sponsor, comparing notes and sharing, what I had last heard. And the weekend, the Friday before the last weekend of session in 2018 in May, we did not know if we had the votes or not. We were damn close. We had 68, we had 69, but we had no idea if we had 71. And we had to have 71 to pass. And so Representative Lang went home Friday night, came back Sunday, and he said, I have decided to call the bill. And I said, well, I think that's the very best thing to do, because we may have the votes. And so on Monday, the next to the last day of session, it was about 3:30 or so. So I went home to, my daughter is a lobbyist, actually for AAUW and other folks. And so I went home to walk my granddog and feed my granddog. And on my way back, they were just beginning to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. So my daughter and I were sitting on the very edges of our seats. And the debate went on for an hour and a half or so. But about 40 minutes into the debate, Dan Brady, our yes vote downstate leadership gentleman, got up and said, I am opposed to abortion. I will always be opposed to it. But in the Bible, it says that we are all created equal. And I am going to be a yes vote for the Equal Rights Amendment, for the Equal Rights Amendment. And there were more than one Republican legislator that was amazed by what he said, and what he said, I know, changed at least one vote, and may have changed others. But he just did very well. They finally called the vote, and we had 72 votes, and we needed 71. So we just made it. And I mean, I've been working on this for decades, so it was wonderful. We went downstairs, we cried, we thanked everybody, hugged everybody. And then we realized that Minority Leader Durkin had voted yes. So we went back and gave him a hug. And he said something to the effect like, I have daughters, and I didn't want them to think that I was a Neanderthal or some silly old goat. And I mean, how precious is that for getting things done? There was one in the Senate, all the Republican women but one voted for the Equal Rights Amendment. In the House, there was only one Republican woman that voted for it. And unfortunately, she got defeated, even though Jenny and I spent a day with her walking precincts. And what we did is they set us up in a Democratic precinct, leading precinct in her district. And my daughter and I went up, knocked the doors, and we said, we are Democrats. And we are asking you to vote for this Republican woman because she had the guts to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. And that's what I think political courage is all about, is being able to cross party lines when your issue requires that. So in the House, there were 6 Republicans that voted for the Equal Rights Amendment. And this did not dawn on me like the next week. This took like 3 or 4 months for me to kind of figure it out. I do not want to offend any of our Republican members, but in my opinion, Governor Rauner was maybe the worst, well, definitely the worst governor in my life, and maybe the worst governor ever, because we went 2 years without a budget. And that is not something that has ever been done before. And so the second year that he did not have a budget, there were Senate Republicans, Minority Leader Christine Rodano, who I thought was a wonderful Republican leader, a woman that just a really, really good woman. She and several other Senate Republicans and some House Republicans met with Democrats, and oh my God, they came up with a budget that was agreed to by Republicans and senators, Republicans and Democrats. And when Governor Rauner found out, the governor said that he would use his billions of dollars to defeat every one of those Republican legislators that had tried to cut a budget without him knowing. And so I think we have Ronner to thank for the Equal Rights Amendment. And I've certainly given you my personal opinion of him. So talk about strange friends or friends in strange places. We also know that the Reproductive Health Act, which that is the bill that maintains that Illinois has Roe versus Wade, regardless of what happens in the Supreme Court, that passed because Ronner signed it. And of course, that's why he was defeated, because his party was not supportive of that bill. So I will present a view that we may have Governor Ronner to thank for the Equal Rights Amendment and for the Reproductive Health Act. So that's my presentation on what happened, in my opinion, on the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, what are we doing this year? This is one of those real crazy years because we all have new legislative districts, and the legislators all have new legislative districts. So we just have to get out and vote for the good guys. And the good guys are the guys that support AAUW issues. Certainly our repeal of parental notice last year that we finally passed was a very difficult bill to pass. And we want to make sure that every person who voted for that repeal gets reelected. Otherwise, our choice power, strength, will be diminished. And we have, I mean, there's just a lot of legislators running against each other. It's just a wild and crazy time. So, and then additionally to that, we've always had a March primary. A couple years ago, they passed a bill, and our primary this year is June 28th. So we have a lot of time to register votes and to get active and to get things done. I think the most important, I think I have shared with you how important the ERA is to me, but much more important than the ERA is the voting rights bills in Congress. And AAUW is working, the voting right bills are one of their 3 top issues. And we just, I'm not sure what you and I can do. Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth are wholeheartedly in support of those bills. I don't know what we can do to change the 2 reluctant Democrats, or I'm not sure I'm going to call them Democrats, but whatever they are, what we can do. But if you know anybody or anything that you think can help us get the voting rights acts in Congress passed, because if we don't, I think our democracy is on its way out. So in my picture, those bills are more important than anything going on in Illinois. But in Illinois, we have a bill that I don't know that it's going to pass this year, but we need to fight for it. And it's Senate Bill 835. That's Senate Bill 835. It's the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Act. It is not fully written yet, but the idea is to have 1 year where all the businesses, large, medium, and small, put in about less than 0.7% of their folks' salaries, so that we have a bank of money. And then that bank of money will be used to pay folks who need medical leave family leave. And the leaves we're talking about are for in-laws, aunts, uncles. Certainly through this pandemic, we have had all sorts of awful issues that folks have had to deal with without the help of medical leave or family leave. So that's going to be our number one issue in Illinois to work. And session ends April 8th. So we don't have a lot of time to work on it. But if any of you can chat to your legislators to see if they'd like to co-sponsor it, that would be dynamite. I think I'm going to stop now and ask if there's any questions. Okay. You're muted. Push your unmute button.
Thank you for the update on the ERA. Where are we now? What can our branch do to move that forward? Because the extension that they had given has no right. I understood that the Senate and the Congress, both chambers, have gone beyond the deadline when they passed a bill that increased their salaries. So that is supposed to be a precedent. So where are we in getting the ERA passed nationally?
Well, that's an excellent question. And on Friday, so I happen to be good friends with Loretta Durbin, and she's a friend, so I don't ask her special things rarely, except in January I did, and I shared with her how frustrated I was with the Equal Rights Amendment. And so I had been a part of a meeting with AJ and some other folks who are very interested in passing the Equal Rights Amendment. And what AJ and other lawyers are considering is when the Equal Rights Amendment was given to the archivist, and the archivist is the person to receive the constitutional amendments, Brady, no, who was the judicial head of the Garland replaced him. So do you remember his name?
No, I'm trying to remember.
Well, anyway, the guy who used to be Garland sent a letter to the archivist and told him that he could not accept the Equal Rights Amendment. And so it has just been sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And so AJ and some other lawyers have thought, well, why couldn't Garland write a note? Because many people, many lawyers thought that the letter that was written by the former head of the judicial system was not well done and not effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so I sent that information and other ideas that AJ and others had. And the senator wrote back to me reasons why he couldn't do whatever it was. But he also sent to me his chief of staff, and AJ and I are meeting with his lead woman in DC on women's issues on Friday. And so I am hopeful that we will find out what we can do to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what Olga was talking about is that there was a constitutional amendment that was out for 200 years that finally got ratified and they accepted it.
Mhm.
And we had this 1983 deadline date, and very few constitutional amendments had a deadline date. So we have AAUW, Illinois, AAUW signed on to an amicus brief that the Secretary of State, oh, well, now I'm going to forget his name, damn it. Our Attorney General, oh, I can see his face. Our Attorney General, the Nevada Attorney General, and the Virginia Attorney General, which are the last three states to ratify the Equal Rights, have filed a case at the Justice Department saying that this needs to be, the ERA needs to be approved. And ERA or AAUW Illinois signed on as well as now and a whole list of different groups to that amicus brief. And I am so sorry, I can't think of our Attorney Generals because he has been really wonderful on it, and I need to give him credit, and then I can't, geez. He was the senator who replaced Barack Obama in Chicago.
Mm.
Kwame Raoul.
Yeah, Kwame Raoul.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So Kwame Raoul has been fighting for us on the Equal Rights Amendment. I happened to be at the County Democrat event in Springfield in August, and there were all sorts of Democrats up speaking, and Kwame Raoul was the only one that talked about the Equal Rights Amendment. And so there were several of us women together, and we screamed like the holy hell had broken off, and others joined us. So I think he got the biggest scream of the event. And I thanked him several times that day for being so supportive and helping us out. So I think, one of the things we could definitely do is send a thank you to Kwame Raoul, our Attorney General. And just, he's really somebody that has really stood up for us and is continuing to fight for us. But hopefully on Friday, AJ and I will get some ideas of what senators can do, what we can do, and the ERA coalition folks.
Yes.
Do any of you know any of those people in the ERA coalition, the National ERA coalition?
I know some of them.
Okay, well, I don't know. It seems to me that Delaware is such a small state. There's got to be somebody in Delaware that is crazy about the Equal Rights Amendment as we are, and could get Mrs. Biden to jab her husband or whatever. But I don't know. They haven't seemed to be able to do that. So
thank you.
Anyway, that's my answer for the moment. It may change Friday afternoon, and certainly if AJ and I learn anything, we'll let all of our public policy people know.
Great. We do have a question in the chat. It is from Eileen Trout Irvin, and she asks, do we need to encourage Durbin and Duckworth to co-sponsor the Family Medical Leave and Insurance Act, Senate Bill 835?
Excellent question, but wrong house. It's in the Illinois House.
Oh.
And the Build Back Better Act is done. And now I'm not going to recall, but there's another package that Biden wanted to have that was 3 billion and now it's down to 1.5 billion or whatever. But in that bill, there is a family and medical leave. And as far as I know, Durbin and Duckworth wholeheartedly support that. I have not heard any problems with them supporting the whole package. It's our two kind of Democrats that have caused that package to be limited. So, but your senators, I know you may not have the best senators for this issue, but if you can talk to your senators and say that, I mean, one of the things, this would really help the pandemic. If people had paid leave when they were ill, then, you know, we might be able to get through this pandemic faster. But it's probably going to be a hard bill for Republicans to support, but it's a bill that Republicans need. Republicans need family leave and medical leave as much as Democrats do.
Right.
So there's no reason for this to be a partisan issue. There's no reason for lots of things to be partisan right now, but it's the world we live in right now. Great questions, though, but just it's not the right guys. Any other questions?
If you have a question for Paula, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat or the Q&A, but I don't see any other questions at this point.
Well, I have so enjoyed sharing with you my views of the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm sure you could talk to someone else and they might wholeheartedly disagree with me, but I know that the stories I have told you are true because I was there. And I think it's interesting for people who are not involved in legislative issues to get an idea of how hard it is and how much work it is, and yet how it can all work out someday. Persistence, persistence, persistence.
Right.
And I think that's what we need for the national right to vote. I mean, if we don't get that, I really fear for our democracy, and I don't think, I'm sure you all agree. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. And have a happy 2022. May we be happy with the primary elections, and may everybody vote that can, and we be happy with 2022 elections in November.
Well, Paula, thank you so very, very much for sharing with us on your up close and personal experience with the progression of the ERA. That's very valuable for us to hear, and much of that we will retain as we continue our small efforts in trying to make this all come into being. We also thank you for stimulating us on the issue of the Voting Rights Act and for reminding us that we really have to work to make sure we retain our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been at this place before in our times of work, but we're there now, and we all need to be reminded, and I'm sure that this branch and our friends in this community will get engaged on all of this. Mm-hmm. And certainly Olga will make sure that we do. So once again, we thank you, and we thank everyone who came today, and be sure you talk it up with those who didn't come, just to let them know how good a presentation it was. So Thank you, and we will see you in February, everybody. Paula, you're welcome to come back then too.
Okay.
February 8th is our next presentation, and it's on African American history, led by Chastity Mays.
Great.
Promises to be an interesting evening as well.
Thank you
Thank
so
you and
much.
good night.
Thank you.